Welcome back to the Two Pointers Podcast. I'm Trevor Everett, and excited would be an understatement to be back recording a podcast. I think the last one now was with Phil Dexter, co-host of Mr. Josh Burton here. We're going to talk about in just a second, or talk with in just a second. But just want to first of all say welcome back, listener, viewer, whatever you're watching on. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe, everything down below. Super excited to be talking. We're going to preview the Final Four, talk about some really awesome things that happened with Florida Atlantic, UConn, San Diego State, and Miami. We're recording this literally 3 or 4 minutes after the Miami game ended, so we're very excited to just get this out there. This spot will be out pretty early in the week since I'll be traveling to Houston at the end of the week. So looking forward to talking about that as well. Keep up with the updates on some what we see on the ground, catching some Lakers game while we're there too. So super excited to talk basketball today. Josh, I believe it's your first time on the show here. I've had obviously your co-host Phil Dexter on a couple of times, but first of all, introduce yourself, what you're doing in college basketball with all of your shows and things like that. Introduce yourself where people can find you.
Yeah, man, it's good to be on. We've had you on a couple times, formed this friendship and all that, but name's Josh Burton, obviously. I own the Everything College Basketball. I like to call it a brand because that's kind of what it's turned into.
Yep.
Started as a little quick synopsis, started as a Facebook group because our immense love for college basketball. Wanted to tap into the marketplace 5 years ago, started this Facebook group, branched out into the Twitter, started the podcast in 2018, and year over year, we've made significant strides. I mean, now this last year, we're into actually going to games, covering them. We're basically literally part of the media in college basketball now. So it's a growing brand, man. You hopped on with us when we did our tournament special back when the brackets were released, and we had Coach Davenport from Bellarmine on. We had Coach Parrott from Rice. We've got these connections, and we love this crazy world of college basketball, man.
Crazy is an understatement. Yeah, we don't have to listen to or watch any of my takes from those shows because they didn't age well. I didn't think we'd be talking about Florida Atlantic, UConn, San Diego State, and Miami.
I don't think any of us did, man.
I'll get to my trick pony with San Diego State later, but obviously that was kind of a mishap. It's a joke around here, but all of your links and everything will be on below. Twitter will be on the screen on YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Before we get into it, if you are thinking about going to the Final Four, I forgot this plug earlier. I'm going to do it now and get it out of the way, and we'll keep rolling. So when we're talking about some actual basketball. But if you're thinking about going to any sporting event, obviously college basketball will be over in roughly a week, sadly. Don't forget you can get $20 off your first purchase. SeatGeek, the code is 2-pointers. Link in the description below will take you to download the SeatGeek app. $20 off, code 2-pointers. If you're thinking about going to Final Four games, that's a great way to save $20. Unfortunately, tickets cost way more than $20. Wouldn't hurt. So, all right. Florida Atlantic. I'm doing them in order of how they made the Final Four, I think is what I'm trying to get out here. I'm still figuring out how to do a pod again. It's only been 2 weeks. But Florida Atlantic, obviously Dusty May led an unbelievable program who I don't have the record right in front of me. Obviously 30-plus wins this year, couple of losses, unbelievable team out of the Conference USA, I found out today will be going into I believe it's the American, right? Are they going to be changing into the American next year? So it's like weird they're going to make all this money and it's actually not even going to go to them. It's going to go to Conference USA. Big for them. But just talk to me about Florida Atlantic, your favorite thing about something, the run we've seen here from Dusty May and his squad.
Well, I mean, it's funny. So I got my first taste of Florida Atlantic back in November because analytically wise, like we're nonstop at the beginning of the year. Once you get a couple games in and you start to look at like the net rankings when they're first coming out, you're kind of looking and seeing where maybe your favorite team is, where other teams stack up. And I kept seeing Florida Atlantic amongst other teams like North Texas in the top 30, in the top 25. And I'm like, really? So then we started to kind of pay attention to them, and then they started rolling. And then when we did our weekly top 25, all of a sudden we're justifying putting them in there. At the time, they were like 20-1. And you're like, all right. But at the same time, in the back of your mind, you're like, well, you know, they're in Conference USA. It's a much better conference this year than it has been in the previous years. Some really good teams in there. But really, how did they stack up? Well, now they're in the Final Four. They're 35-3. They've won 35 games this year, and they just knocked out on their path this last weekend. They took out SEC, one of their favorites during the regular season before they hit their slide, the number one defense in college basketball, Tennessee. And then all they did was beat one of the hottest teams and hottest players in the country, Kansas State, in Madison Square Garden last night in a great college basketball game to go to the Final Four. So, Dusty May has done a tremendous job with this program. They've gotten better year over year since he's been there. They've got great guards, John L. Davis, Elijah Martin, and then they had a big man step up last night, kind of on the national scene that really made a huge impact, and that's Vladislav Golden. They're just an experienced, grown. What I like to say about them is like they're a grown man team. You look at them, there's not really a freshman. Nick Boyd's a freshman that plays, but everybody else is an experienced guy. And the fact is, you want to hear a scary thing, obviously there's the chance of somebody transferring or leaving or whatever, but if everybody wanted to come back, everybody could come back except for Michael Forrest. And I don't know if he's got like that extra COVID year he could bring back. So we could see Florida Atlantic, the same squad, run it back again next year. And that's a testament to Dusty May, because honestly, people like going to Boca Raton for retirement, vacation, and whatnot. Man, there's a lot of it to be excited about Florida Atlantic right now.
Yeah, I may be having to slap my way down the East Coast and go catch a game next year because it's unbelievable environment too, small gym. I didn't want to bring this up yet, but I'm going to do it because we have to be honest journalists. So you talking about everybody returning. Well, obviously it would be really important for all those guys to return if their head coach returns. So I guess the question I would have is it worth him keeping all those guys back another year? Probably, because he seems like the kind of coach that could do that. Do you see him leaving this year, or is that something you see? Because I think there's so many jobs next year that could be open. I know people were throwing out the likes of like Clemson and some other places that were, your Power 6 potential places. Ohio State, even if they have another bad year, I saw on the radar for Dusty May. But is this a next year move for him? Or I guess what would you do if you were Dusty May?
If I was him, he's a Midwest guy. He graduated from Indiana as a student manager. He is a Midwest guy. And it seems like the Notre Dame job is going to be gone. I thought that would be the job for him.
I was very surprised by that, by the way. I'm with you. I was very surprised by that.
I feel like I don't think anything's been official. If it has, I've missed it. It sounds like they're going in for Micah Shrewsbury. If not him, they're going to make a move that's not Dusty May. I thought that would be perfect for him because he is a Midwest guy, gets to come back home. But if Notre Dame's not there, do you really want to go to Penn State? I mean, yeah, you could get more money. You'd be in a better conference, but you're going to have to build that thing back up because I'm sure Shrewsbury's guys, a lot of them's going to transfer out. You're not going to have Jalen Pickett. If I was him, unless something like Oregon popped up, because there's a lot of drama surrounding Oregon right now. Dana Altman making comments after they got knocked out of the NIT. If Oregon came open and they came calling, I would take that. But if that's not happening, dude, I think I would just sit there at Boca Raton, try to get my guys back. I know he mentioned that they've been being illegally recruited during this tournament, some tampering going on. But if you could get like John L. Davis and Elijah Martin and Golden and Greenlee and all of them back, bro, you could have less pressure on you, try to run it back and see what happens, and then have like another year to bake, should we say, build your name, and then whatever happens next year, what opens up, then you jump at that. But I think the smart play would be to run it back one more year if you could get those guys back. Now, if everybody wants to transfer out or whatever, try to go pro or whatever the case, then yeah, I'm on the first train out of there. But if you can get most of those guys back, I try to run it back.
Yeah, I'm with you. And that's part of the reason I brought it up is obviously 0 top 100 recruits under Dusty May, and obviously that hasn't mattered. And that would obviously be a huge change for them if they were to keep him and keep all those guys coming back, because I'm sure that somebody would be excited about this run. We see it all the time in football. These guys go to the Ohio State-Michigan games, and then they commit to whoever wins that game if they were on the fence. It's like that's not necessarily happening with FAU, but you keep Dusty May, you keep all those guys coming back -1. He probably does have the COVID eligibility, right? The guy that hit the 2 big free throws in the last game. But yeah, the Notre Dame job, I brought it up because there are less jobs this offseason, but I saw a lot of ones that circulated that, just seems like the Sharks would be in the water at that point. And obviously a big program like a Notre Dame or like a Clemson or like an Ole Miss this year or whoever, right? All of those are going to be available this year, but next year you have no idea what's going to happen. Unfortunately, I did confirm it. Shrewsbury is official to Notre Dame, so obviously that's a huge job that I think anybody would be banging on the door, but Shrewsbury's also got a lot of great experience, so I'm really excited for him. Anything else about Florida Atlantic before we talk about the Huskies?
Dude, I'm just so impressed with them.
I am
Like
too.
you watch them, like I said, we watched them through the regular season and thought, okay, they're a good team. But you watch them during this tournament, and they are so mature. Like John L. Davis goes, whatever it was, he pretty much goes a whole half, doesn't score the ball particularly well. Second half, he comes out and wants to just take over. Elijah Martin, big play after big play. Vladislav Golden, big 7-1 dude coming out and defending ball screens against small guys like Keontae, or I'm not Keontae Johnson, I'm sorry, Marquise Noel. Like this team is connected. When they get behind, they don't panic. They make the right play at the right time, and they will not be out toughed, which is a huge thing in the coaching world. When you're watching teams, if you're playing a team that will not be out toughed, that is harder than hell to play against, because you have to basically kill them when you have an opportunity. If you don't, they're going to be there for the win at the end. And I'm just super impressed with, they're not the biggest team outside of Golden, and they're doing it as a connected unit. They obviously believe in one another. They believe in what Dusty May is telling them. And this team is playing with a lot of confidence right now. I mean, it's been a fun ride.
Yeah, I really enjoy Bart Torvik and looking at how I evaluate some of these teams in the tournament. And I love when I don't see any red or any light shade of red on Bart Torvik. I look across the board and I see green or white. They've got a lot of really good things. I'll highlight some of that stuff in more detail when we get to the preview of the matchup against San Diego State. I will say I have to give Phil a shout out because he was riding them all year. I mean, he was like, they're my, they're my darling child. And I think I remember texting him verbatim, and I said, your darling child has made the Elite Eight. And I thought that was going to be the end of it. And obviously we saw how that turned out. So super excited for them. Excited to see that brand of basketball next week. So
Well, real quick before we move on, you want to look too. They've got those 3 losses. Their biggest loss of the year of the 3 was 13 points. Game number 2 to Mississippi. They lost 80-67. That tells me that this team, again, does not get blown out because of how connected they are. They're top 30 in both offense and defense. They shoot the 3 ball well, but don't rely on it. Like, this is such a hard team to play against, especially when they're clicking. They got the nation's longest win streak right now at 11 as well.
yeah, I'm super excited because I honestly forgot about the top 30 and top 40 in offense and defense, because that's something that you look at every national title, I believe since 2004. They were top 44 in offense and top 22 in defense, and all of the teams currently fit only 2 teams currently fit that bill, and it's Florida Atlantic and UConn. So obviously I would love to see that as a national title. We'll talk about that in a little while. San Diego State's offense is not as good, and then Miami's defense is not as good in terms of those KenPom ratings. But yeah, Florida Atlantic in terms of balance, unbelievable type of roster that they fit the bill perfectly. Speaking of unbelievable roster and balanced perfectly, the UConn Huskies are perfect segue to the next team. I'll lead with this. This was the most dominant run to the Final Four that I can remember, and I was pretty well attentive for the 08-09 North Carolina Tar Heels. Obviously, a lot different expectations coming into the season, as that team was ranked number 1. They were the last team to be ranked number 1 and do that consistently throughout the year. UConn, obviously, coming into the season, weren't ranked. Then they were after a ridiculous start. And then they had their stretch, and obviously Coach Hurley said some choice words about we'll see what happens, and we'll see, you see us coming, and well, they're in the Final Four. So thoughts on UConn? Thoughts on their honestly, just dominant would not even be a good word. Every synonym for dominant, but dominant run to the Final Four.
Just steamrolling teams is what they're doing. And there's 2 other teams that remind me of like how they've been so explosive getting to the Final Four. And that's 2018 Villanova. You go back, they were just rolling teams, shooting threes, just embarrassing teams. The other team, and this is a little homerish, but the 96 Kentucky Wildcats Untouchables team still holds the largest margin for average victory. I think leading up to the Final Four game against UMass is something like they beat all their opponents by an average of like 31.5 points a game. So those are the other 2 that remind me of this 4-game stretch run to the Final Four. But no, UConn, we knew at the beginning of the year, going into conference play, when they were sitting here at 14-0, we talked about it on like our podcast, just, this might be the best team in the nation. They're killing teams. They're beating teams by an average of like 15 plus or more. And then they got conference play, and they went on that stretch where they lost like 7 of 9. And then they figured out at the end of the year again, And then you kind of knew when they got the 4 seed in the NCAA tournament in that tough region we all talked about, like, all right, it's going to be a hard road, but man, UConn is that dangerous ass team because how they're playing, their size and everything. And yeah, they didn't have to play Kansas, but they've blown out St. Mary's, they've blown out Iona, they've blown out Arkansas, and they blew out Gonzaga. This team is the real deal. They've got the size. They've got an All-American in Adama Sanogo. His backup, 7'2" freshman Donovan Clingan. They've got great backcourt play during this run here at the last 3-4 weeks of the season. Newton, Hawkins, Jackson, and then a guy like Joey Calcaterra is coming in and hitting threes. Alex Caravan's hitting threes. That rotation that they play is big. They're physical. They get after you. They're hitting their shots. I mean, I just don't know how you're going to beat UConn right now.
Yeah, the part that I try to, like, as an NBA and college basketball guy, I try to draw lines in the sand and see things when I watch basketball, understand what I'm watching. I just can't keep watching this UConn team, regardless of the dominance. Even throughout the year when we saw the struggling in the Big East play, we know they're not this level of team, but they look like an NBA team. Like, they have multiple guys.
They're huge.
Statistically unlikely that all of those guys are pros, but Jordan Hawkins is in my top 60. Andre Jackson's in my top 60. Donovan Clingan is number 60. Sanogo's not far outside the top 60. Like, there are multiple guys in that start, and that's obviously no disrespect to Newton. I have people I trust that have Newton in the top 60. So that's 5 guys right there that are all NBA pro level players, and it's crazy to see them.
Listen to this lineup when they decide to go this lineup, and this has been their starting 5 over the last, basically the whole tournament here. Tristan Newton, 6'5", Hawkins is 6'5", Andre Jackson, 6'6", Caravan, 6'8", Adama Sanogo, 6'9", and if you sub him out and bring Clingan in with that lineup, that's 7'2". Nobody's smaller than 6'5". Like, we don't see that often in college, to your point.
Yeah, you mentioned the Villanova. I was just looking at the Villanova 2018 run because I had thought this was the similarity. I mentioned the UConn team. The UNC team of 08-09, but this Villanova team, looking at 2018, I'm just kind of making sure I've got my bones about it. They beat Radford in the first round, comparing it to UConn. They beat Radford in the first round 87-61. In the second round, they beat Alabama 81-58. That was a 1 versus a 9. In Sweet 16, they beat West Virginia 90-78. So that's a 12-point win, but that's probably more like thinking back to that game, that probably felt like more than 12.
Yeah.
In the Elite Eight, they played Texas Tech 71-59. Just, I mean, margin of victory not the same as this UConn team. That's what's even crazier is the margin of victory is not the same, but it felt the same dominance, which was what makes UConn more impressive.
And keep in mind the Sweet 16 game against West Virginia and especially the Texas Tech Elite Eight game. Those are 2 top tier defensive teams that they just put a showcase on. And that Texas Tech team, the same team, the very next year goes all the way to the national title game and very easily could have beat Virginia in overtime. So that's how dominant Villanova. And then you go look at the title game. They
I'm looking at it right now.
Beat the shit out of Michigan.
95-79 Villanova, Kansas in the semifinal, and then 79-62 Michigan.
Yeah, beat the shit out of everybody.
Yeah. So in terms of the UConn team, that, like, obviously we'll preview them in a moment. They're obviously the best team left in terms of every metric possible. They're number 1 in KenPom. Adjusted efficiency metric, 3rd in offense in the country, 11th in defense. We know that they're good. What will it take? And I know we can technically say this question later when we have them play Miami, but what's it going to take to slay the Dragon?
Well, first of all, you're going to have to find a way to neutralize the interior play because looking ahead to Miami, they don't have the size that UConn does. They're going to give it all they've got, but they're going to have to figure out a way to neutralize. And I still think the way to beat UConn is you go back to the Big East play when they struggled. They fell in love with the 3-point shot. And I know during this tournament, they're hitting their open ones right now. Hawkins, Jackson, Caravan, they're hitting their open ones. But I think once they get down to Houston with the different sight lines, bigger arena, shooting's typically down, and it's been down overall in the tournament. I think going into this weekend, teams in the tournament were a combined 30.5% from 3. I think you figure out a way to do your best to neutralize the interior play and make Connecticut a 3-point shooting team and just dare them to hit. I think that's how you're going to have to beat them.
Which is impressive because this was the first game that Miami hadn't shot to the game today, and I don't want to preview the UConn matchup too much. But Miami, this was basically a game where with 8 minutes left in the second half, you were like, there's no way they win this game because they're shooting 2 for 15 from 3 or whatever it was. And now look at it. I mean, they won the game. So I think that actually plays into Miami's hands a little bit. I'll talk about that more a little bit later. I think it's really impressive what Coach Hurley's done. Obviously, in 2018, takes over the job, and there were some Kevin Ollie truthers. But I think the change of the guard was obviously worth it. Looking back on it now, hindsight's 2020. After 5 years later, you make a Final Four run with a guy like Coach Hurley. But I'm really impressed with UConn. Do you have anything else about them before we roll on to San Diego State?
It's just a testament. And in today's modern age of social media, wanting to get people fired and not a lot of patience, that, yeah, it took him 5 years to get to a Final Four, but now he's got this program in the right way, the right trajectory. They're in a Final Four. If some of these UConn fans would have had their way a couple years ago when they had like a losing season, that he would have been gone then, but he's had time to implement his style fully, get a full recruiting cycle in, and now you see the payoff.
All right, let's hit San Diego State and Miami, and then I have some questions before we actually preview and predict anything. We've got plenty of time. San Diego State, I hate to lead with this because that's what everyone else led with today, but I've got some thoughts on San Diego State regardless. But unfortunately, I hate to ask this question, but was the foul call the right call?
By rule, but no, this is funny because my brother is on his little soapbox right now defending it and all that, which is fine. It's his opinion. My opinion is by rule book, yeah, it's a foul.
That's it.
But here's where I'm upset is that you watch this game, they allowed these teams to beat the hell out of each other.
That's an understatement.
Smacked over the wrist, falling down, hooks and holds, and all that, which is fine. All I ask for from officiating crew is determine how you want to call the game early and let it ride. But the fact that you allow them to be physical and nasty to each other, and then the most important shot of the game, you're going to call that, and it wasn't that egregious. Again, by the rule book, it's a foul. Like I'm not going to deny that. But the fact that you've let them play a certain way for 39 minutes and 55 seconds, and now you want to call that the game on the line, like I didn't like the call. Like I'm just going to say I didn't like, and I understand other people who say it's a right call because, again, by the rule book it is, but I don't like that you establish that you're going to allow them to be physical with one another, and then it comes down to that, and then you're going to call that of all things. You know what I'm saying? So yeah. I just want them to, however they call at the beginning, call at the end too.
I'm with you. I'm in the camp of it was the right call regardless, but at the same time, I'm not going to argue with anybody because I think either way the point still is null because they made the call. It was a foul. If we're just going off logistics, it was a foul and it's okay. Obviously, Creighton fans are going to disagree with that, and obviously I understand where you're coming from. Again, I'm not going to argue with anybody about it because at the end of the day, if they didn't make the call, it's still consistent. We still probably go to overtime, and we still have we still at least have 5 more minutes of a game that that matters there. So ultimately, granted, we don't know the result after a 5-minute overtime. We have no way to predict that, but I think it was right. San Diego State gets redemption, and this is the point I wanted to make. First of all, it's a running joke on this program that I picked San Diego State to make the Final Four. Obviously, in 2020, I could not make that prediction, but I'll just be honest with you. They were 30-2 at the 2020 season before it was cut short due to the COVID-19 pandemic, unfortunately. I went back and deep dive 2020 San Diego State, which this team had a lot of parallels beyond this, but I went back and I looked, and honestly, that 2020 team was more impressive than I think we realize. They lost their 2 losses on the season. They're 30-2. Their 2 losses were a combined 6 points. They lost by 3 to Utah State unfortunately in that championship game, and then they lost to somebody early on in conference play. I didn't write it down, unfortunately, but they lost by 3 in that game as well. So that team literally was 6 points away from being a perfect record. Yeah. Just ridiculous. And there's a lot of parallels to the style of play and the coaching and stuff, but it's a running joke. I should have probably picked them 4 years in a row. The 1 year I don't, they make the Final Four, but as an honorary Aztec, I'm super excited to watch them next week. So,
and they've got 6 losses on the year right now, and you go back, they got blown out by Arizona out in Maui. They lost the next night to Arkansas by 4 in overtime. They've lost to St. Mary's, New Mexico, Nevada, Boise State. all of those teams are good teams. They were either in the tournament or on the bubble, and those are all six pretty damn good teams to lose to. But I'm just super impressed. We had San Diego State pegged at the beginning of the year. We did our magazine. We knew that they would be good. Matt Bradley coming back. We knew that they would be good. But my thing, and I think I tweeted this out from the ECB Twitter during this game against Creighton, is that they have grown men. Like, you look at these guys, they're an older bunch, all juniors and seniors, but they are grown men bodies. They are big, physical, wide. They take no crap. They defend with their life. They go from defense first, and then what they can get out of the offensive end. There's this big conversation piece right now with certain media members about modern basketball and like the mid-range 2-point shot. The long two is a bad shot. Everything needs to be dunks and layups or 3-point shots like the NBA is going to. But San Diego State's made it to the Final Four by just playing basketball. If the mid-range is open, they're taking the mid-range. If they can get to the rim, they'll take it or hit the three. They are just so physical and mature. This is why they're in the Final Four, because they can get down like they did to Creighton, rally back. They can hold a lead, stave you off because their defense is so elite. And I love the backcourt pairing of Matt Bradley and Darian Trammell. And then you got other guys. I mean, Kashad Johnson's playing well, Micah Parrish, and then Nathan Mensah's kind of came out of nowhere as a rim protector this year. 6'10" senior, blocking shots, protecting the rim. All great defenses need a rim protector, especially in today's game where they run a lot of middle ball screens, high ball screens. He jumps out, defends that well, and then if you go to the rim, he's meeting you at the rim. So I'm just super impressed with the maturity level of this San Diego State team, and they're always going to be in games playing this style.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of just the style of basketball. Like I said, I'm not one that rides the line of the 3-point, like where they should be taking shots and whatever. I think it's a really, really fun physical. I think is a really great way to put it too. They're a super physical team. I love Coach Dutcher. I always want to say his name wrong every time I see it. I'd love to be. I think I tweeted it today. I said I aspire to be as positive and happy as San Diego State Coach Duster, because he just.
How great's his interviews too during the
unbelievable
when they do those post-game interviews,
even during the game, he's like, granted it's only 8 minutes into the game, so he's not mad about anything, but he just like knows when to flip the switch.
Well, and then they ask him, like, some of these coaches, like Coach Cal, like blows you off if whatever, sometimes gives you a little pre-rehearsed kind of deal, doesn't feel genuine. But you get Coach Dutcher, he's smiling, and they're asking, like, how's this feel? He's like, well, I'll promise you this in Houston, because they asked him, they said, what can we expect from San Diego State in the Final Four next Saturday? He goes, I can promise you this. There's going to be a lot of good defense. And I'm like, that's great, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's
not
genuine.
coach speak. It's good.
Yeah, it's genuine.
Yeah, I have to give, you mentioned Nathan Mensah before. I have some friends and colleagues that are from Ghana, so I just want to read this and I can clip this later and send this to them so they know that I'm thinking about them. But Nathan Mensah was born in Ghana. This is courtesy of Front Office Sports. The San Diego State star almost turned pro last year, hoping to support his family, but didn't want to leave school on a bad note. Because of his student visa, his NIL situation is very complicated, but he was able to take an internship at a financial firm, stay in school, and now has helped the Aztecs reach their first ever Final Four. So unbelievable defense. He played on Kalkbrenner today. He's probably the first person this season to really give him a hard time consistently. You could see the frustration. That's not something Kalkbrenner, I'm sure he's gotten frustrated before, but you could physically see it. I mean, slamming the hands on the floor.
Yep.
And you could see that Mensah was really doing that to him. So fair credit to him. And he was stretching it out basketball-wise. He was stretching it out 15 feet and just like making that shot because it was there. I mean, you mentioned the mid-range. He was doing it, and he was a big reason for their success.
Well, here's something else, too, about San Diego State is Matt Bradley played well in the second half against Alabama. He played pretty good today against Creighton. But this has not been his best tournament. Like, if I remember right, the Alabama game, he was in a lot of foul trouble and had a set for long stretches of that game, and they didn't miss a beat. Like their experience, and again, they're grown men. When he's on the bench, they don't dip like you think a mid-major historically would when their best player is on the bench for extended minutes. He's on the bench, no big deal. Trammell, Butler, Ladie, all those guys carry the load. And then when Bradley comes back, it just adds to it, which is super impressive.
Anything else on San Diego State before we hit Miami really quick?
No, just congratulations to Coach Dutcher, the program. This is one of we talked off air a little bit about blue bloods. I mean, by no means San Diego State a blue blood, but you look back ever since Steve Fisher got there, they've got a nice little basketball history building that they've been good going back to Kawhi Leonard days. So I think their breakthrough's finally there, and they were able to get the right matchups, play their way into it. So I'm just happy for that program, man.
Honestly, the Mountain West needed it just as bad as San Diego State. Honestly, the Mountain West needed it more than San Diego State did because they've made at least, they've made Sweet 16 runs. They've been good, you said, consistently. Elite Eight, obviously, first time this year, and then also first Final Four. So don't get me wrong, San Diego State wanted this, but the Mountain West needed this.
Hey, one last thing, too. San Diego State's got the second best three-point defense in the country. Teams are going to shoot 27.8%. Alabama and Creighton, both teams that shoot the three ball pretty damn well. I forget what the official stat was, but they combined for like 4 of 44 in those two games from three. They cut you off from the 3-point line.
Yeah, and they're playing against a team. I'm just making sure I got this right when I pull it up in terms of 3-point percentage. They're going to be playing against, let's see, who are they playing against? God bless, I'm already having a hard time.
Florida Atlantic.
They're going to be playing against Florida Atlantic, who obviously is a very good balanced team, so I have to pull up their 3-point stuff. I'll pull it up when we go to preview them. Creighton
went 3 of 13. I'm sorry, Creighton went 2 of 17 from three against San Diego State, and Alabama went where is that? Where are they at? 3 of 27. So both teams shot a combined 5 of 44. 5 of 44 from three.
Ridiculous.
That's insane.
Florida Atlantic is 43rd in the country in 3-point percentage. They don't rely on it. They're obviously top, and they're 11th in 2-point defense and 37th in 2-point percentage. So they're a very balanced team. I think that won't be a huge. I mean, it'll be a huge thing for the fact that San Diego State, that is a stylistic difference for them, but it won't be the reason that Florida Atlantic loses. So that's a huge thing to think about when we talk about the preview in just a minute. All right, I'll make Miami quick because I'll talk more about them later when we talk about the actual game preview. But is this a win for NIL?
It's got to be, right? I mean, it's got to be. I mean, Isaiah Wong, Nigel Pack demanded more money or else they were going to leave, and then they acquiesced, and you see what happens. I think the story of Miami is elite guard play. We knew it all year. Their guards definitely carried them through this tournament, and I think fair play, they've had the hardest road to the Final Four. They played a Drake team that a lot of people had upset alert on that game as a popular 12 seed. Then they played a good Indiana team, just ran them off the floor. Then they played a team that everybody thought could get back home and win the national title in Houston, just absolutely embarrassed them. And then they played one of the hottest teams, maybe the best team in the country coming into this tournament, Texas. I mean, that's a hell of a 4-game stretch right there, and they made it look pretty comfortable when all was said and done.
Yeah, obviously the Texas game, they were that was about the only time they really were uncomfortable because their first lead after 21-20 was with 5 minutes left, 73-72. They were down by 13 in the second half. And Norchad Amir had his 4th foul with 11:06 remaining in the game. So obviously that second half was probably the first time they had really been obviously the close game against Houston, but they were obviously fighting back against the wall there in the second half against Texas, and that was really their first thing. Really neat, though. 17 years ago today, Coach Larrañaga made the famous Final Four run with George Mason, really the first Cinderella of the modern NCAA era, at least in the 2000s, I'll call it, just for so I don't get canceled for saying that. Yeah. But 17 years ago, that's really cool to see Coach Larrañaga make his second Final Four. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm a diehard. I mean, I'm an ACC fan to heart, but I'm just excited. I'm happy that Miami did it because I think they've had a really awesome recent history. And regardless of the NIL implications, they deserve it.
Yeah, I've been a big Jim Larrañaga fan for a long time, not just lip service. When I was coaching high school basketball here in my hometown, our head coach, actually, we took a lot from Larrañaga when he was still at George Mason, certain how they played zone, how they did inbound plays. We took a lot from Larrañaga, and I've been a big fan of him once I started getting the coaching side and understand his ability to do what he does at a high level. So I am really happy with him. Miami, I thought was a kind of a sleeping giant based on location and the conference, and nobody could figure it out really until Larinaga came in. And since he's been there, what, like 13, 14, 15 years, however long it's been. And they've won ACC titles. They've done good in the tournament, and now going back to the Final Four. First time for Miami, second time for Larinaga. Just, I mean, that's a good story. Obviously, the dude knows what he's doing, and even at his age, he's still learning. You watch him in the locker room after these games, he's dancing, and the players obviously rally around him. And Miami's got such elite guard play. It's been really impressive this year.
It's really impressive to see the best basketball conference beat the one we thought was the best today in Big 12 versus ACC. So I'm very happy. Yeah, that doesn't hurt your feelings. It's okay. For the 800 Big 12 fans, that's going to be great. But I have a question about seeding, because that was a very popular conversation with all of these teams, quite frankly. They were underseeded, overseeded, so we're going to play the game of were they seeded too high, too low, or just right. We're going to start back at the top with Florida Atlantic. Was Florida Atlantic seeded? I know the answer, but were they too high, too low, or were they seeded just right?
They were underseeded.
Yeah,
no way they should have been a 9. And you want to know something else we didn't even mention? How close were they? They honestly probably shouldn't even be in this situation, because you go back to the Memphis game. Memphis had them dead to rights with just a couple seconds to go. Kendrick Davis turns the ball over. It leads to a layup. I mean, that we could very easily not even be talking about them right now. So the fact that they were a 9 seed, absolutely criminally underseeded. They were more towards probably like a 5 or 6.
Yeah, I would say comfortably a 7, which is still a 2-point jump. So not exactly a huge. I mean, that's a huge jump regardless of anyone's thought process there. Obviously, like you said, Memphis had them dead to rights, 66-65 win there for them. Let's say they were the 8, they'd still be playing up. Let's just assume that they would swap places with Memphis. 8-9 in that same position, or at that point, if they were to shift around even into that 6 range, they'd be where your Wildcats were. They would have been playing Providence. I don't know if that means Kentucky ends up where Michigan State is at 7, but I think that they were a comfortable 7, which means they were playing. The road would have been them playing USC and then Marquette.
Yeah,
and
it makes
Kansas
a difference.
State. Yeah, and then Kansas State after that.
Fun.
I mean,
it's funny, like they always say in fighting, boxing and MMA, styles make fights. Well, people were like, well, seed, you're going to play these teams anyways. But again, to your point, if let's say Florida Atlantic was like a 7 seed and you swap them, let's say they're not even in that region. Let's say you drop them to where Texas A&M's at, who we thought was underseeded, right? Now they've played Penn State in the first round. The way Penn State shoots a 3. Then if you get by, you have to play Texas in the second round. So honestly, at the end of the day, the way everything shook out, Florida Atlantic had a great draw at the 9 seed, but they were still underseeded. But again, if you bump them up a couple seed lines, their path could have been totally different.
Ooh. What about the Missouri draw? They would have been in that Missouri place against Utah State, Arizona, Princeton, Creighton, obviously in that regard. Baylor would have been on the other side of that if Creighton still won, and then they obviously would have played San Diego State to make the Final Four. So I think you're right. I think that might have actually been the best draw for them, because even the Iowa-Auburn draw would have been horrible. The Houston, Miami, Indiana, Texas. I mean, you're changing a lot of landscape of the rest of that tournament there. So we agree. They're seated too high, and I think I would have landed them at a 7. I don't do bracketology, but I'm going to try my best to try it next year, because
good luck.
Shout out to Mr. Shout out to Dan Vasta. I'm just going to steal his and change a few, and I'm sure he'll appreciate that. He placed very, very well this year. So
until they have you explain why you picked them, you're like, I don't know.
Just being different. Yeah. All right, UConn, too high, too low, or just right as a 4 seed?
I think, they got hot at the end of the year, as we mentioned, and I think a 4 was right. Had they won the Big East, they say they beat Marquette in that semifinal, went on to beat Xavier in the final, then I would have said a 3. But I think based on how everything played out, a 4 was just right for me.
Okay. I'm with you. I think all things considered, we can't sit here and be dishonest and say they should be a 2 or a 3, because I think you're right. If we took everything in consideration like we did with, it's a hard conversation, because Florida Atlantic is the opposite. We think they should have been a 7 regardless, or a 6 even, and I think UConn probably could have been a 3 maybe, but then at that point, who are you kicking out of a 3 spot? or anybody undeserving in that 3 spot? Is Gonzaga going to get bumped? Is Kansas State going to get bumped? As we saw, neither of those teams needed to get bumped from there. Baylor maybe, but Baylor had a tougher schedule in the Big 12, and then Xavier. I think they probably should have been it over Xavier. I'll be honest, but
well, Xavier swept them twice though in the regular season.
So, but we don't take head-to-head in consideration.
Well, we don't. We don't.
Like,
but,
what?
But Xavier also went to the final of the Big East.
That's fair.
So, I mean, they got blown out. So, to me, I think Connecticut was just right.
I think so, too. I'm just drumming it up.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
No, I think they were seated just right. San Diego State, they fell in, obviously, as a 5, I believe. Making sure I've got this right. I'm trying to flip between 9 tabs. They fell into a 5 in their region. Are they too high, too low, or just right?
No, I think they're just right. The Mountain West didn't do them any favors. They had the loss to Boise. They had a loss to Nevada and New Mexico in conference. No offense to the Mountain West.
Good losses.
Good losses, but you can't lose them if you want a top 4 seed.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
and plus the big non-con games that they had. We mentioned Arizona, Arkansas, St. Mary's. They didn't win any of those. So I think a 5 was favorable for them. Just about right.
I think 5 was perfect. I honestly think the region, looking back on it, I thought the region was so much harder, but then Missouri lost to Princeton. No offense to Princeton, but then Arizona lost to Princeton, of course. Creighton had a pretty easy run there to play them, all things considered, other than Baylor. I think they were probably given the best place because they were able to slay the pretty fast-paced Alabama, and they were able to be a completely opposite style and just crush them. So I think 5 was perfect. I don't think I would have put them any other place in here because I think if they swap places with Drake or Miami Drake there, then I think we're having a different conversation potentially. If I think they swap places with St. Mary's VCU, maybe. I don't know. I just think they were placed in the perfect spot. Now, I think Oral Roberts, since they didn't put up anything against Duke, and San Diego State's an even better defense than Duke is, that's probably not a question either. So I think the perfect place for them to be, which sometimes that happens. We look back on these tournaments and we go, wow, they got the absolute most perfect draw they could have. So
yeah.
Speaking of perfect draw, like you said, Miami had a tough run against Drake and some others here. They had to play Drake, Indiana, Houston, obviously going to be the potential home court advantage for them there in a few weeks. And then obviously they played Texas tonight. Did Miami get over, under, or perfectly seeded?
Man, I'm going to say again, I think they were perfectly seeded because they had 7 losses and 6 in the regular season. But again, you look at their non-con. They played 2 good to decent teams, 2 tournament teams. They played Providence, which was a win, and then the very next day they played Maryland, which was an 18-point loss. They played in an ACC conference that was not great again this year, and they lost inside conference play. They lost to a bad Georgia Tech team. They lost to an okay Pittsburgh team. And they lost to a bad Florida State team. The other ones being a tournament NC State team in overtime, and then they lost to Duke, and then they lost again to Duke in the ACC tournament. I think they were just where they needed to be because the non-con didn't offer much and the ACC didn't really offer much. So I think that where they were seated at was just about right for them.
Yeah, the whole point of this exercise was because I knew that we were going to say that Florida Atlantic was underseeded, and I wanted to prove that point even more. So all the teams were everybody else was perfect. Florida Atlantic should not have been a 9. That was the whole point of that exercise. All right, let's give some fair recognition to things that happened in the tournament. Obviously, I had this segment planned, and then I decided because of the timeline of when I got back from my honeymoon, trying to squeeze it back in with the Sweet 16 this weekend. It was really tough. I was going to play a game of, it was either going to be you or whoever I was going to get on, and I was going to be like, hey, 30 minutes to 45 minutes, catch me up on what I missed. Because I watched games, don't get me wrong. I literally, quick story here, I between dances and between photos at my wedding, I had people coming up to me being like, this team's down. I think that would have been round of 32 because it was the Saturday, right? So some notable round of 32 results that day was, the Iowa or the Auburn-Houston score that was close at one point. Obviously, Alabama beat the crap out of Maryland. That's not a question. Princeton beating Missouri. And even the night before, we had Fairleigh Dickinson's upset against Purdue. Yep. In our rehearsal dinner. It was on a projector screen. We were in like a restaurant bar. It's in a brewery restaurant type of bar. So we're like, of course the games are on. That's not even like, we turned that slideshow off so fast. We were like, hey, the Purdue's about to lose, and somebody's like, pull it up. So we watched.
Wait a minute. You didn't have the Kentucky Province game at the same time playing?
Well, we switched between every game.
Oh,
Every
okay,
commercial we
okay,
switched. Yeah.
yeah.
But it was still a great time. Like, had speeches going on, had a great time at the rehearsal dinner. But yet, I'm watching Purdue and Fairleigh Dickinson over my shoulder, and it's
Yeah.
just so much fun.
The Saturday as well, the day of your
Yeah,
wedding,
yeah.
Tennessee beat Duke that day.
Yeah, yep. Actually, funny you say that. That was one that I was trying to find notable results that people. I remember people coming up to me distinctively. What was some other upsets in round two?
Arkansas,
really quick?
Kansas.
That was it. Someone had come up to me literally between, because that was one of the night games, right? That was later in the evening. It was like mid-afternoon, evening. Someone had come up to me. Yeah, someone come up to me after dinner, and we were dancing, and it was like, "Hey, Kansas just lost to Arkansas," and I'm like, we have no TVs in the place, so it was really cool. The Tennessee Duke was literally the result. The final would have been, it started around 2:05. We walked down the aisle at 4, and that was right around the game concluding. And one of the first people I saw, or people saw when they walked out, was one of my friends from Tennessee. I literally could see him watching the final seconds. My dad's standing up the stage as a Duke fan, so it was really funny. And we were like figuring out ways to figure out the result without knowing it, trying to find and watching that guy watching the game. So it was really funny, a really funny, interesting little nugget from the day of the wedding. But anyway,
that's hilarious.
What were we talking about? We were talking about favorite moments. I missed a lot of obviously really unique things on that Thursday, Friday. Didn't miss a lot of major upsets, I'll be honest. I watched the Furman game live. Just relaxing before some things that weekend. But what was your favorite thing or team or moment or something that when we look back on this tournament, or you look back on this tournament, you're going to be like, this is something I remember?
I mean, obviously the obvious one will be the Fairleigh Dickinson over Purdue. Like that's the greatest upset in tournament history. We've discussed that. Like the Baltimore County over Virginia was obviously historic because it was the first time ever in the men's game. But Virginia also was missing DeAndre Hunter. This one, Fairleigh Dickinson, the smallest team in the country, going against the biggest team in Purdue, and they were in that whole game the whole way. Their coach called their shot after winning the play-in game, said they had right in front of the cameras to his team that, hey, I've watched a lot of Purdue tape. We can beat these guys. I want Purdue to hear this, and then they go do it. So I think that's the big thing everybody's going to remember. But some other minor things, I guess, that I'll take from this is that guard play reigned supreme in the year of the big, literally in all publications. We had our preseason magazine that got released. Field of 68 did theirs. It was the year of the big man. All these top tier big men back in college basketball. But at the end of the day in the tournament, elite guard play has shined through. That is the biggest thing to me outside of any team or anything. Elite guard play has carried these teams to Final Fours, carried other teams to wins in the tournament. Elite guard play stands out. And the other one is coaches getting their credit that they finally deserve. Dusty May. You look at a guy like Jerome Tang, had a great season, a great tournament. Brian Dutcher at San Diego State. You've got
Tobin Anderson. Let's just be honest. I want to talk about him when you're done. So go ahead.
Yeah. Tobin Anderson. I just went blank on Connecticut's head coach for some
Hurley.
reason. Hurley, yes.
One of the Hurleys.
Hurley. All these guys getting their credit because now the national stage gets to gather around and watch their teams perform and them coach. So elite guard play, the Fairleigh Dickinson over Purdue upset, and then the head coaches who've been great for a long time or good for a long time getting their just due. I think that stands out a lot to me this tournament.
If you're just talking about teams that honestly, if you just want to go with coaches that had Sweet 16 and beyond, because obviously Musselman took care of a Bill Selfless Kansas team, if I remember correctly. He was not back for the sideline for that. Was that correct?
No, he was not.
Okay, that's a huge, by the way, that's a huge asterisk, because I'm not saying they win the tournament or make the Final Four or beat UConn, but I'm saying that Kansas probably beats Arkansas with Bill Self.
Well, it makes a difference. Yeah. It makes a difference because Norm Roberts, no offense to him, but some of his design calls down the stretch were not Kansas-like, running stuff
not
that
Bill
they normally
Self-like.
get. Yeah, not Self-like. And the other thing, I do want to throw this out. And this might be an ever-changing landscape in college basketball we'll have to keep an eye on over the next couple of years. But how disappointing were the Blue Bloods? Duke, Kentucky, Indiana, obviously North Carolina didn't make it. But some of these Blue Bloods, Kansas, all out by the round of 32.
Yeah, last year's Final Four, Duke, North Carolina, Kansas, Villanova. This
Yeah.
year's Final Four: Connecticut, Florida Atlantic, San Diego State, and Miami.
Yeah.
Like just a literal 180 if I've ever seen one. Other than obviously, I think Connecticut deserves the blue blood conversation. So you could arguably say 1, if not 0, this year.
Yeah.
Really quick on Tobin Anderson. I want this publicly so I can send this to somebody. Yes or no, he deserves every bit of credit for that Iona and getting the Iona job.
Yeah. Yeah, why wouldn't he? He was
He's
great.
67% winning percentage in his career. That's all levels of basketball.
He was great.
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
He's great in Division II. He
Yep.
ran through Division II ranks, and then I had somebody text me the other day consistently, just leaning into this take, and they were like, "He doesn't deserve the Iona job because of one game against Purdue." I'm like, that's ridiculous. I don't care that they didn't win their tournament. Merrimack was the best team in their conference. It's an NCAA rule. We can't change that for now. So he deserved every bit of that.
I'm absolutely with you. And people who make that argument obviously don't watch the sport. Like they don't watch the sport. This is a Fairleigh Dickinson team that won 4 games last year, 4-22 last year. Tobin Anderson comes in from D2, as you mentioned, ran through D2, brought in a lot of D2 guys with him, and wins 21 games, and then has the biggest upset in tournament history. Like, how does that not translate? Just people, what they need to say is like, I only watch the sport during the tournament, so my opinion's valid.
I know this guy, and he's not going to listen to this. I know this guy doesn't. He's a North Carolina fan who went to North Carolina, who watches as much college basketball as I know. And it frustrates me because I'm like, how can you sit back and not understand? At least take 2 minutes to realize how good he was at Division II level. He was unbelievable.
Well, it's so annoying too. And we have a guy in our Facebook group last night when Florida Atlantic knocked off. I just went blank. Who did they beat? I just went blank.
That's a good point. I'm looking at it too.
I literally just went
beat
blank.
up by this tournament. Kansas State.
Kansas State. Thank you. When they knocked off K-State, a guy in our Facebook group, we're all giving, congratulations. It's a cool story. And they're like, well, this lucky team, it's another lucky team that's going to get embarrassed in the Final Four. And all of us kind of jumped on it. He's a good guy, but he has that old mindset of like, well, they're from a bad conference and they're going to, they lucked their way to the Final Four. But
they didn't look anything.
They won 35 games. They played in a decent Conference USA mid-major conference.
Charlotte just won the CBI, and then Texas, North Texas, and UAB are both fighting for the NIT final.
And Rice won a game or 2 in the CBI. Like, come on now, like this conference is better than what people want to give them credit for. And if you win 35 games in a year, 34 up until last night, that's not luck.
It's not.
Like, you're doing something right.
I mean, it's not like I know we've talked about this before, you and I, but there's a luck stat on KenPom. It's not like we don't have that. They are, okay, I will say, I know that luck stat is about winning close games. I think it was you and I that talked about this recently, but they are top, let's see, they're top 40 in luck. So I will say they are 37th in luck, but it's hilarious, but it's also like, but that's also because they won a ton of close games. Gonzaga's ranked ahead of them in luck. Looking at like notable tournament teams, Kansas was ranked ahead of them in luck. So it's obviously a subjective stat. Oral Roberts was a top 10 team in luck.
Listen, if Kansas State would have went ahead and made the Final Four, would those same type of people argue that Kansas State was lucky? They would not, because they came from the Big 12. But if you look at the tournament bracket, things open up for K-State. Like, they opened up. They had to play Kentucky. They did get Michigan State, but they avoided Duke.
Marquette.
They avoided Purdue. They avoided Marquette. They end up having to play Florida Atlantic in the Elite Eight. So things open up for them. You look at other teams. The bracket opened up for a lot of teams that just could not take advantage. Like, UConn didn't have to play Kansas.
Yeah. And then they walloped UConn or Gonzaga, so it didn't really matter.
But nobody's going to say that. They're only saying it when they come from a mid-major or small team that, this luck thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, Alabama's tournament bracket opened wide open with Arizona getting beat and Baylor getting knocked off by Creighton and them having to play San Diego State in the Sweet 16. Like, they should have cruised to the Final Four, but they didn't.
Yep. Yeah, two of the 4 teams remaining are mid-majors, and I'm super excited about it. Obviously, that's subjective to how you feel about the Mountain West as a mid-major. Honestly, performance-wise, they are a mid-major. So, All right, I'll be really quick on mine. You mentioned Kansas State. That was a really beautiful segue. Marquise Noel's run, I'm going to never forget it. As much as I actually was able to catch every single Kansas State game despite the crazy weekend and couple of weeks we've had here. Just unbelievable performances. I've got them in front of me, and then we can roll into actually predicting this tournament, these Final Four teams. But Marquise Noel's round of 64 against Montana State, 17-14. Round of 32 against your Wildcats, 27-9. Sorry, Sweet 16 Michigan State, 20-19, which is an NCAA tournament record. Which, by the way, seems kind of crazy because I really thought maybe I thought it would be higher. I don't know. I really don't know why. I think the NBA record's 18 by Scott Skiles or 19. I know it's Scott
his
Skiles.
Is 30. His is 30.
Wait, is it really 30? God.
30, yeah. 30.
Okay,
yeah.
Anyway, yeah, that's ridiculous.
He did it back in like 93 or something when he played for the Magic, yeah.
Shout out to Scott Skiles. 20-19, so I guess that is still impressive for a 5'8" guy. And then Elite Eight versus FAU, 30-12. So he averaged 20-plus points per game and well over 10 assists a game. I mean, just ridiculous stat line. I'm never going to forget it. It was an unbelievable run. I think just honestly that team as a whole, as somebody who picked them to make the Final Four, so I just want to rub this in everyone's face. I thought this Kansas State team was deserving of this, and I predicted it, and I'm really sad they didn't make it, but at the same time, I think the better team won.
Well, I mean, a lot of times you think of a guard especially controlling the game by scoring, and he had the 30-point game. It was that 30-12 game, 30-12 assists was only the third time in NCAA history that a 10-plus assist game had happened. Billy Donovan in 87 Providence. I forget who the other one was, man. I'll have to look that back up, but he's the third one to ever have that. He did this not just scoring, but he controlled the game, literally controlled the games he played in. By making passes, by stepping in and making steals, by just dominating the ball, and he controlled the game at a 5'8" guard. That was just a super impressive run. I forget who the other.
I tried to look it up really quick and I couldn't find it either. Take a look at it and see if you find it. But at the end of the day, he's talking about his impact, and we'll move on after this. Talking about his impact, at one point, I don't have the exact time in front of me, but at one point in that second half against FAU, he had that 30-point, 12-assist game, obviously. He had at one point, I think they were maybe in the 50s, 60s in the second half. He had assisted or scored on all but 10 of their total points, and they were in the 60s of the game. So, impact felt way beyond the stat sheet, and the scoreboard obviously being able to find your teammates like that. Just some ridiculous stuff. And also that play call, it's 100%. It was a play call, right? We're 100% in agreement that it was a play call. Yes,
it had to have been.
Arguing, why would they argue? You make this play call, you should make this thing, and then all of a sudden Keontae Johnson's just jumping out the gym behind this. It's just ridiculous. I still can't fathom it.
No, it has to be a play call. It has to be. They're fake arguing just to get a backdoor lob. That's super genius, though.
It is. And we'll obviously, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, can't get fooled again, or whatever that George Bush quote was. I don't know. But anyway.
Oh, the other player was Dwayne Wade.
I was actually I was stalling so you could find it. So that was actually what I was doing.
Yep.
But it really was impressive.
Billy Donovan, Dwayne Wade, Marquise Noel, only guys have 30-plus points, 10-plus assists in NCAA tournament games.
Shout out to Dwayne Wade. That's really cool. So.
Yeah.
All right, let's actually, and this will unfortunately be semi-rapid fire, but we've talked about these teams. We've given some good things about them, and we want to obviously make some official thoughts and predictions. So, Florida Atlantic, San Diego State. I'm going to pull up my Vortorvik, make sure I've got this. I still have it pulled up again. So, making sure I've got all my stuff in front of me. And then obviously Ken Palm, want to make sure you see where these teams are. I will lay this out a little bit. So we're going to do San Diego State and Florida Atlantic first. But the remaining teams in the tournament in terms of Ken Palm, Connecticut is number 1 overall in Ken Palm, 28.95. San Diego State is 14th. Florida Atlantic, by the way, 17th. They're third in Ken Palm out of the 4, which is really awesome. We were talking about that earlier. Again, they fit the stat really, really well. I think they just fall outside of the defensive metric. Shout out to Ryan Hammer. He makes the video every year. It's really unique. But it's basically, I think if you're top 44 in offense and top 22 in defense, I think is the stat. Every champion since 2004 has been that. And Florida Atlantic's defense, if I'm correct on that, is 29th. So they're just outside of it. They fit the bill almost entirely. It's really crazy to think. And then Miami is the 4th Ken Palm team at 22. So impressive stuff here from these 4 teams. FAU, San Diego State. Any thoughts stylistically, statistically, whatever, and then we'll make an official prediction.
Yeah, this was a game of grown men going back to my
Yep.
comments about San Diego State, but Florida Atlantic has them too. This is going to be interesting because San Diego State just played a big 7-footer in Kalkbrenner, and Florida Atlantic we've talked about with Golden. It's going to be really interesting who dictates tempo because San Diego State wants to keep it in the half court. Florida Atlantic wants to get up and run. So it's easier to slow a game down than it is to speed one up. But we've seen with FAU, they can play in the half court. So I think can Florida Atlantic neutralize or at least handle the physicality that San Diego State will bring to this game is going to be a huge factor. And then the 3-point line, every prediction I do comes back to 3-point line, especially with today's game. And we talked about it. You're not getting clean looks from three against San Diego State, especially in a dome where the sight lines are bad. So can Florida Atlantic just muster up 5 or 6 made 3-point shots will be a massive key in this game. And they have to push the tempo, beat SDSU back in transition, steal a couple easy layups. They can't turn the ball over. Against Kansas State last night, they had like 18 or 19 turnovers in that ball game. Can't turn the ball over against a great defensive team like SDSU. This is going to be a fun one, though, because, again, no matter what happens, neither of these teams will go away if they're losing. And I think this is coming down to who has the ball last. This is a hell of a fun matchup.
Yeah, I'm honestly the entire time I'm listening, but I'm also over here staring at everything that I use to make, and obviously I'm not perfect when it comes to picking any of these games or predictions like anybody else, but I sit here and I'm like, yeah, San Diego State's the better team in a lot of important categories for the way the game's played currently. And you mentioned the 3-point defense; they're second in the country. I'd love to find who's first in the country. I don't know how to search for that on here. I'll be honest, but they're second in the country in 3-point defense, and I think that's going to be the difference. Ultimately, I think they're
Tennessee
more physical.
is.
Oh,
Tennessee
that's right. Okay,
was
good point.
is whatever.
But regardless, that's ridiculous, and it's going to be the difference maker. And I'm just having these moments in my head. If I close my eyes and I go, yeah, San Diego State's the. And by the way, all of my listeners over the last 2 years are going to have a really good laugh at this when I predict against them eventually, maybe. And then they're like, well, yeah, that's of course they're going to make the Final Four in the championship game. The 1 year you didn't pick them. I've been a closet Aztec for too many years to not make this joke, but it's like, I can sit here right now and close my eyes, and I can see Florida Atlantic in the championship game because that's just what's going to happen, and because they deserve it. And they're honestly not even a team of destiny at this point. They're a team of destiny that has proved that they are supposed to be there. I have no clue. Like, I don't even know. I don't even want to make a prediction. I have no reason, rhyme, or why not I would pick these two teams. And I'm honestly kind of mad at myself that we picked this game first.
um, because this tournament's taught me something that we've already known, but it's really shown a light that defense wins. Look at these games. Yep. The best defensive teams win these games. And because of that, I'm going SDSU. I think this game is going to be a slugfest. Again, these big domes shooting is not great. Like, you go back, I think the last time it was in Houston was ironically Connecticut and Butler, and that was one of the worst national title games we've ever seen.
Yeah.
The shooting was awful, and I hope it doesn't happen, but I don't expect great shooting performances, and that's going to rely a lot on the team that gets the ball to the rim, to the foul line, and who plays defense. And as much as we love FAU, I think San Diego State wins this game. I think I could easily see in this game SDU wins like 56-54, something crazy like that. So I think defense travels. They're big, physical, and I think they cut off the 3-point line, slow the game down. I think SDSU goes to the national title game.
Answer this question, honest to goodness, gun to your head. Who has better guards?
It depends on what kind of guard you're looking for, right? Because if you're wanting physical guards who defend, can make plays, you go San Diego State. But if you want it,
Davis and Martin do that too. That's why.
Well, they do. But what I was going to say, if you want guards who are explosive in the full court, who make plays, who hit shots at a better clip, then you go FAU.
That was good. Thanks. That made that harder. I was going to have whatever you said. I was going to pick the game on that. So, oh, sweet Jesus. I don't know why I'm not a fan of either of these teams. Why is this so difficult? I knew this was going to happen. This is why I wanted to do this tomorrow, but I'm glad we did this today. I've picked against San Diego State for so many for so many weeks. I don't. Oh, I'm gonna throw up. All right, I'm tired of dragging this on. I think Florida Atlantic makes the title game.
There you go.
I don't know why. I don't know why. I don't even feel good about it. I just got chills. I don't like it. Everything about it, I just hate. God. Okay, I'm not backing out of it. I'll be honest, but at the same time, I rode San Diego State for so many years, and why now would they just say, you know what, we're here against this team that honestly just deserves to be here, 35-3. They've kicked everybody's butt this year, and I just, I think the glass slipper fits. I really think Florida Atlantic. I was actually, you know what, I'll summarize with this before we move on really quick. I said this to my wife sitting on the couch watching this last game. I said, I said stylistically and how deep they are and something like this, and I was like, if Florida Atlantic can get one of UConn or Miami, because I was like, I think Texas would have beaten anybody. I think Texas would have beaten UConn probably, but I think Florida Atlantic. If they make the title game, they have a really good chance of winning the national title. And I know that sounds crazy, and I'm like, I just think if they can get past San Diego State, there's no reason they can't beat UConn because those teams are very similar defensively. And honestly, this is I quote this now, but if Florida Atlantic beats San Diego State, they have a very strong chance of winning the national championship.
They do, absolutely.
And that's honestly what I'm going to lean on, even though I'm an honorary Aztec. I shouldn't be doing this, but I think Florida Atlantic makes the national title game.
Yeah, all right. I think it's a close one.
Less to preview on the other side because these are Titan teams that we've talked about all year, but we do still have thoughts of them. UConn, Miami, anything that you have does Miami have a chance in this game?
Yeah, of course they got a chance. Yeah, I didn't know if they could come back from being down to Texas, but yeah, they've got a chance.
Everything's possible.
They've got the better guard play. I do think that they, as well as Jackson and Newton and all these guys have been playing. I think Miami's got the guard play. Isaiah Wong, Nigel Pack's been unreal in this tournament. But can they slow down Connecticut's front court play? Can they keep them off the glass and not let Sonogo and Klingon get a bunch of offensive rebounds? UConn's guards are bigger. We've talked about the size. This is going to be one that Miami's not shot the three extremely well, especially today. They did not shoot the three ball well. They have to find ways to manufacture points from beyond the arc and pull Connecticut away from the rim as much as possible. But I like Miami's guards in this game, but I don't know if I like them good enough. I think Connecticut is going to win this game and stretch it late. I think it'll be tight throughout, but I think Connecticut just physically imposes their will on them, wears them down on the backboard, and just pounds them until Miami finally breaks and can't hang with them anymore. I think Connecticut wins this game.
Here's what scares me. So, quite honestly, I don't think Miami was even the third best team in their bracket. So I think that scares me a little bit, and that's not any rhyme or reason why or why not I should be even having this conversation with them against UConn. I think UConn, just in almost every aspect, is better. I think you're right on guard play. I told you for months now, like people always say guards win in March, and I correct them with good guards win in March, and Wong and Pack, when they are on together, which again was my hiccup for them all year. When I went and saw them in Chapel Hill this year, I was like, if they don't get them going together, Love and Davis are going to wipe them off the floor. And that was a 6-point game in Chapel Hill with a minute left. And that was right at the cusp of when UNC's season really fell apart. So, like, Miami's guards, as good as they are very inconsistent. And I think that really scares me. And I think if there's any team that's going to destroy them, it's going to be UConn. And I'm not going to say this is the case, but I'm not shocked if it's the opposite of what you said. I'm not shocked if UConn does the exact same thing to Miami that they've done to everyone else because of how opposite the styles are. And how Miami was able to come back against Texas despite it being the guards being the best, the four best guards on the floor going against each other. Obviously in Hunter and Carr, which is an unbelievable matchup for them. I think UConn wins. I think people are going to not give Miami enough credit. I'm with you. I think you're putting it out there properly that Miami is going to put up a fight in this game. I've got a great friend here, lives here in Raleigh, who's a Miami fan. He just texted me. He was watching the game late after being dealing with something, and he comes back and he paused it. He told me not to text him, whatever, and he's like, he's excited as ever, and I'm happy for him, but I think this is the worst case scenario draw for Miami. They play any other team, they're fine, but God, I mean, this is one of the most dominant teams I've ever seen in a tournament. So, I hate to keep saying that.
Key point I would
go ahead.
Key point I would just throw out there. I would not be surprised if we watch this game Saturday and Larinaga doesn't go back to his George Mason days and we don't see some 2-3 zone just to try to neutralize the interior play and make Connecticut the 3-point shooting team.
Norchad Omir's given me no reason not to think that he gets in foul trouble again. And I think if he doesn't get in foul trouble, Miami can win this game. I think if he gets in the 4 fouls, I know he did it today. Texas doesn't have the front court. That's the difference. Texas's front court is not stellar compared to UConn's, and he got in foul trouble today, and they were able to put him back in with like 8 minutes left, and he almost fouled out with a minute left again, and they changed the call to Cunningham. So it's possible that they win this game if he stays out of foul trouble. If Omir is the difference maker, he's out rebounding Sanogo, and he can deal with Klingon, or they can figure out some kind of rotation with somebody on Klingon, or let Klingon have his day. I mean, he's had a great tournament, honestly. It's going to be really hard. I think 2 really important factors. Connecticut's 2-point defense is ridiculous. Their 3-point defense is too. They're 12th in the country in 3-point defense. They're 14th in the country in 2-point defense. They are not a very good free throw shooting team in all aspects of it. Their free throw rate is very low. They also aren't as good of a free throw shooting team as Miami. So I think that matters. But they rebound really well. They're 2nd in the country in rebounding. They're 8th in the country in effective field goal defense. They're just going to swallow Miami up probably, and I could honestly see the same result I've seen from UConn all year. Not saying it's a Gonzaga type result, but they could definitely do it.
I'm right there with you.
So our national title, jeez Louise, I have Connecticut and FAU, and you have San Diego State and Connecticut. The question is, what is the most, regardless of what we just picked before we actually make a national title pick, because it really doesn't matter who's playing each other, who do we think makes it and wins it. What would be the most fun national title? Because I think a lot of people, you're going to see it this week. I've already seen it in text today, but we're going to see like, this is going to be a boring ratings final or boring ratings Final Four. And I'm like, I get it, because the only top tier team in it is Connecticut, so it's okay. Miami's obviously got a huge fan base in Florida, but I'm not saying the ratings aren't going to be good. I don't care. I'm going to be there. So I'm not going to watch it on TV anyway, so I'm not a rating for them. But the point is what would be the most fun for ratings?
If you want,
I think it's an easy answer.
To me, I think if you want styles and you want a high tempo game, it'd be Florida Atlantic, Miami, because both teams will get up and down, great guard plays, shoot a lot. Okay. And plus it'd be the fun little South Florida owns college basketball kind of deal.
That's actually cool. I didn't think about that. Yeah.
I think if you're looking just for a fun game, then you'd go Florida Atlantic, Miami, because that's going to be highly entertaining.
Oh, okay. I was thinking just ratings, period. Like if the ratings matter.
Well,
you got to have UConn's got to be there, right?
Well, it does, but think about this. If you've seen Florida Atlantic, Miami, and people be like, oh, whatever, the namesake, right? But once the game gets going, and let's say by halftime the score is like 45-45 or 50-50, then people are going to be like, you'll be tweeting about like, this game's insane. People will switch over.
Yeah. Switch over from what? It's a Monday night.
There's wrestling. It's post-WrestleMania night.
The Masters doesn't start till Thursday. Who cares? Next Thursday, by the way.
WrestleMania. There's a huge wrestling following.
Whatever. Monday night. But they can record it and watch it later. Who cares? Anyway, I think you're probably one of those, aren't you? You said you made it.
Oh,
I'm
a huge wrestling fan. I always have been. Yeah.
So what are you gonna have it 2 screens? I mean, is it gonna be one of those nights?
Saturday. Yeah, Saturday and Monday. Yeah.
I love it. All right. Well, I will not be. I would not be double screening anything because obviously both games will happen in front of me. So it's really hard to double screen whenever the 2 games I'm gonna ever watch at the same time are gonna be on within 2 hours of each other. So
yeah.
I think. Oh, sweet Jesus. All right, let's make the final, because I really want to sit on this for a second, because I really do think that I believe this when I say it. You have San Diego State, UConn. Who wins the national title?
UConn. I just, as tough as San Diego State is, and they will be able to match Connecticut's physicality. They will not back down from a fight, their defense and all that. But Connecticut's just too much. Like the way they're playing, it's going to take a really bad game from them. And I just don't, they're unbeaten outside of Big East play. They've steamrolled everybody. You go back to Florida, you go back to all the teams that they played in the non-con when they were 14-0. Everybody outside the Big East, they have just beaten them up and left them for dead. And I think they'll do the same during this Final Four. I think Connecticut's your national champions. They've got too much, man.
So I hate this because I feel like granted 2014 was a long time ago now that all things considered. It really was. It was almost 10 years ago. It doesn't it have this perfect, now granted, this is probably the most good. This is probably the best UConn team this century. Honestly, maybe I'm under at least champion UConn team because maybe I'm forgetting some of the guys on that. I know they had the Ben Gordon teams, the Okafor teams, etc. I don't think those guys won the national title that year.
No, they didn't.
But they
George Mason beat them.
That's right. How funny is that?
How funny is that? Yeah.
Interesting.
Hey, you want another quick parallel?
You're gonna make me overthink this, by the way. That's
I know we're running out of time because my lady's complaining, but you want another funny little parallel? Not only the Larinaga with George Mason knocking out Connecticut and all that, but think about when 2011 when Kimba and them won in Houston, right? Their Final Four consisted of Connecticut played a power in Kentucky, like they are with Miami. On the other side of the bracket at the time was two mid-majors, Butler, VCU. Who do we got on the other side of the bracket that they'd meet in the Final Four or in the national title game? We've got FAU, San Diego State. It's like history's repeating itself in the same building. And that's why I think Connecticut's going to win as well.
All right. I'll be quick since we do have to go because my lady's not complaining, but she will be soon. So here's the problem. I really do think Florida Atlantic can win the national title. I've believed that for about 6 days now. And then they walloped everybody on the way to this Final Four, and obviously they didn't wallop the last game, but they beat Kansas State in a very convincing fashion. And the problem is, Connecticut, everything you've said, history repeats itself, same building. I mean, good God, the other side of the thing had mid-majors. I mean, it's perfect. It's beautiful. But this is also March Madness, and because I really do believe it, they always tell you, make a bracket, you go with your gut. I went with my gut this year. San Diego State made the Final Four the one year I didn't pick them, right? I went with my gut, and I said that Oral Roberts Duke was going to be the winner. That's going to make the Elite Eight, and that'll make that region interesting. That obviously ended up not mattering. For the third time, those are just two examples. There's plenty of other ones. I had Drake Kent State in round of 32. A lot of gut stuff there, right? I do think, just out loud here, Florida Atlantic's 3-point defense, 2-point defense is really good. So is Connecticut's. They're 69th in 3-point defense. UConn is 12th. So I think there is actually really, really tight styles here. I know that there is a talent differential. I'm totally understanding of that. But there's a lot of really good things. Both teams make their shots. They're both top 31 in every single field goal metric there is known to college basketball. So both these teams know how to play quick, know how to play slow, and know how to defend. And you know what? I think it'd be really beautiful if history didn't repeat itself for a long. I know I'm always the guy up here, NBA history, that's always like NBA history repeats itself. This is not NBA history. This is March Madness. I think Florida Atlantic wins the national title. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but honestly, I just want it to happen because I'll be there. I'm just going to be really rude about it. I want it. I want to watch Dusty May cut down a net and take a $6 million check from somebody.
That'd be wild.
I think it'd be awesome.
It would be perfect because we've said since like December when we kind of watched all these teams fade and new number ones week after week that we said this is going to be the wildest tournament we've ever seen, and it has, and that would be the cherry on top if that happened. And real quick before we start to wrap this up, I told you I had a hot take, and this kind of leads me into this hot take, so I hope you're ready. The Florida Atlantic story is beautiful. Like, it is beautiful, and if they won the title, that would be absolutely insane. But I'm sort of the belief that as much as we love March Madness and love these upsets, Florida Atlantic and Furman and et cetera, Fairleigh Dickinson, I think that we like them for the first game, because once some of these Cinderella teams and some of these higher ranked teams start falling by the wayside early, then we start getting some of these matchups, like you talked about, ratings that aren't the big ratings play. I don't care what people say. They love name brands. We love the good underdog if it's won, right? But we've had a tournament filled with underdogs, basically. And I think we like the upset for the first game. But then we kind of want them to go away in round two. So that way, when we get to Sweet 16 and Elite Eight, we can see Alabama and Baylor or Arizona. We can see a Kentucky and Michigan State or a Connecticut, Kansas. And we can see all these big games, the best versus the best. So my hot take is I think everybody, or not everybody, but a lot of people that follow this sport and love March Madness, we love the upset, but only if it's in the first round, or if there's only one dog or underdog who makes its way. If we start having, like, this makes for a fun tournament, like, and we all love it. But deep down, I think some of us feel like we get robbed by not seeing like the household names play each other down the road.
I think you're 100% right, and it's a thought process we've had for months now because I say we collectively because I just read earlier last year's Final Four: Kansas, North Carolina, Duke, Villanova. That is the most blue blood level thing other than Kentucky. Like that's if you swap Villanova for Kentucky, that is it. You have your four best teams, most historic teams, four best teams in the country when they're good. That is ridiculous. And then we turn around the next year, and a Florida Atlantic has a really strong chance to win the national title as a 9 seed, and they really are better than a 9 seed. Like, that is what it is. So, no, I think you're right. And honestly, I'm just going to say it now. I think to back your point up even more, I'll be very, very heavily keeping an eye on what the ratings are on Tuesday morning. I think they come out Wednesday morning, actually, but 2 days after the national title when we get the full official, I think it's the Nielsen ratings. But I'm not shocked if it's a multiple million difference from last year. Multiple million.
And I know a lot of people would probably disagree on the surface. No, we love the upset. I think deep down everybody loves it for the first game. Like, oh, let's get
I love
crazy
it for this far. I think it's great. I love the four Atlantics here. I think it's unbelievable.
We do because we covered the sport and love the sport.
Fair.
But at the same time, deep down, like today's games, if we would have got Alabama, Arizona instead of, no offense to Creighton, San Diego State, but if we would have got to see those two Titans lock horns, don't you think it would have added a little something to it? You know what I'm saying, though?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I think
I'm more emotionally invested if it's. I get what you're saying from a national level and from honestly a casual perspective. I'm with you. I completely agree. It's hard for me to separate that because I've been such a passionate college basketball fan for so many years, and I live in blue blood country. You do too. We get it. So it's good for us to be able to make the difference. I had more fun. I told Danielle verbatim today. I had more fun the last 24 hours, 48 hours of basketball than I've had in a long time. Like. Legitimately, that VCU was probably the VCU run, and it was they were the team that year. But we've got multiple VCU type teams this year. It's crazy to think like from 2011. So I have more fun. I've had more fun watching college basketball in the last 48 hours because I know that those games were ridiculous too, right? Like we really, even Thursday and Friday, like just unbelievable games. I think we had 7 games on Friday, and all of them on Thursday, and all of them but one was not a blowout. I mean, just ridiculous. Unbelievable day.
No, the tournament's been great. It's been great.
But it's because of those small teams.
Well, you go back to the VCU's run, though. That's why I'm saying one. Because you go back to VCU's run. Look who they knocked out. I think it was USC, Purdue, Florida State, Kansas. Now compare FAU's. They went through Memphis, FDU, a struggling Tennessee team, and then Kansas State was their best win. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like I think the collective of America likes the one because it's special, and if they have to go through the hard fight to get there, like George Mason did, having to take down Connecticut and North Carolina and all them back in 06. If it's one, but when we get a little too crazy, it is super fun and it's great stories, but when it comes to crowning our national champion, I think we want to see the top programs lock horns. I think that's a hot take.
No, I'm with you. I think I'll lean this way to end. I will say that I think we are going to start seeing more of this year. I think this is going to start being the new normal. Too. And I know that sounds crazy 12 months after what I just said as Kansas, like I said, UConn, or Kansas, UNC, Duke, and Villanova. I think we're trending towards more of this year's in the future. And I'd love to clip this and you and I chat again 12 months from now. And it's, I can't think of 4 teams randomly right now, but if we see a Final Four like this again next year, I'm not going to be surprised. So, all right, plug away. You've already made your national title pick, obviously UConn. I've got Florida Atlantic, and I really do believe that. I want people to understand that. Plug away. People know what you guys got coming this week, next week, et cetera, as college basketball gets wrapped up here in the next 6 days.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we're doing it tomorrow on Monday or if we're doing it on Tuesday yet, but we've got our review of the Sweet 16, Elite 8, preview of the Final Four and all that coming up. You can find us. I know you said you'll link us, but the Twitter's at East to Be Podcast 10. You can find all of our podcasts and shows. We do 2 a week. You can find us where all the major podcasts are hosted at: Spotify, Google, Apple, so all that good stuff, iTunes, whatever it is. The Facebook group, which kind of started this whole deal for us, it's just go to Facebook, type in the search bar Everything College Basketball, you'll find the group. And that's basically it, man. We got the YouTube channel. Just search up Everything College Basketball. Go give us a subscribe. The podcasts are up there. We've got interviews prior to the start of the tournament with some of the tournament coaches. So got a lot of content, man. And we'll keep plugging away through the summer and as we get ready towards next year as well.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for your time. I know we went a little bit longer than we said, but unbelievable year in the tournament. Looking forward to seeing it unfold here in the next couple of days. As always, thank you for your time. I appreciate you coming on. First time of many. Check out everything that Josh said right here. Twitter will be on the screen. Everything will be linked below. Don't forget $20 off your first purchase SeatGeek. First link in the description below. $20 off. Code 2-pointers if you're trying to go to any games the rest of this year of any sport that's not, sadly, March Madness. This has been the 2-Pointers Podcast. Haven't signed off in a while, so I'm going to probably forget. 2-Pointers on Twitter, 2-Pointers on Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff. All of it's below. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for listening. On behalf of Josh, we'll see you later.